The average person spends 76% of their paycheck within the first week of getting paid. When it comes to payday, it can be hard to know the best thing to do with your money. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through this 6-step plan to transform your finances. Step 1 is all about getting a reference point and creating a baseline. We need to know what we're working with. There's an effect at play here called the ostrich effect. This is where we avoid negative information. We'd rather not know about the state of our finances. And this goes somewhat to explain why 40% in the UK and nearly 2/3 in the US say they're living paycheck to paycheck. Of course, there's some caveats to that stat. Clearly, there's going to be some people with much bigger issues explaining why they're living paycheck to paycheck. But there's also some really high earners in there as well that feel that way. And it's because they really have no idea where their money is going on a regular basis. So the first thing is really simple. It's literally writing down all your income versus all of your outgoings. And you'll be amazed by how many people don't do this. So list out all the forms of income you have. It might just be simply one from your job. Then list out all of your outgoings. And then specifically with your outgoings, you want to split out what are your essential living costs. That's going to include your housing costs, food, transport, any other regular payment you have coming out that you deem as essential for you to live. The idea with stripping out your essential living costs is so you can determine a percentage of your total outgoings that's going towards your essential living costs. You want to aim for this figure to be around 65%. If you can get it lower than 60%, then you're in a good place. If it's a lot higher than that 65%, this is where we need to target this aspect first before we move on to the further steps. It doesn't necessarily need to be one thing that you're going to suddenly change that's going to affect that figure. It could be a few small little changes that over time could help you to bring it below that 65%. Of course, that is no magic number. It's just a target to aim for. It could be things on the income side, such as looking for any extra work, overtime, maybe even having a conversation with your boss. There might be a low chance of you getting a pay rise from having that conversation about pay, but you have nothing to lose in having that conversation. Know your worth, back yourself, and be willing to negotiate. Maybe even take a step back and review your situation. Have you been in the same job for a while? Have you been with the same company? It could be that you're within the same company and you've been moving up the ranks, moving up the ladder. But actually, is it worth looking elsewhere? It's very clear that you're going to get a smaller pay rise by taking internal moves than it could be looking for a similar job, moving elsewhere, that you potentially could get a bigger pay rise. Of course, these are massive decisions, but it's just maybe something to consider. You can also look on the outgoing side as well. And the biggest cost, of course, is going to be your housing costs, whether that be your rent or mortgage. Make sure you've done enough research into your mortgage. Are you on the best deal? When is that coming up to renew? And what your potential option is going to be. If you're renting, it's going to depend on what flexibility you have, the relationship you have with your landlord, the area that you live in. You may be limited in terms of where you can live based on where you work. When the time does come to move, it's important that you can factor these costs into this new framework. And it may be that you have to make a really tough decision that may not seem optimal in terms of living standards in the short term. But by using this framework, it's going to put you in a much better financial position in the long run. The same with energy bills, utilities, internet, phone bills. Make sure we've done enough research into these contracts. Are we on the best rates that we can get? What are the other potential options do we have? Once we have our baseline for reference, we can then move on to step 2, which is starting your emergency fund. The emergency fund is there as your safety blanket. It's there to cover unexpected costs, such as the car breaking down or medical expense, or even you losing your job. It's designed to cover your essential living costs. One of the reasons we calculated that in step 1. My advice to start with is just to save 1 month of your essential living costs. The general recommendation in the long run is to save between 3 and 6 months of essential living costs. But I find if you start with that could take you 2 years to save, and actually having a bit more of a balanced approach will do you better in the short term. This step is really a psychological one. It's that financial peace of mind, knowing that you don't need to go into debt to cover an unexpected expense. On paper, it's not going to look like the best use of that money. You're going to look at the returns in the stock market and know you'll get a better return there than you will just parking your cash in a bank account. But if you do have an unexpected expense come up and you have to go into debt, not only will you have the interest potentially to deal with, but also the anxiety that comes with it. You want to have this money parked away that you can easily access, and it's also getting a high interest rate. This moves us on to step 3, which is all about reducing high interest debt. Now, step 2 and step 3 can be a bit more of a blended approach. If you've got a really high interest debt, we're talking 30, 40% that you're continuously paying interest on, then it makes sense to clear that first before starting to build an emergency fund. And when it comes to clearing that debt, there's 2 main methods that we can use, the avalanche method and the snowball method. On paper, the quickest way to reduce that debt is the avalanche method. This is where we're going to list out all of the debts that we have and we're going to rank them by the interest rate with the highest interest rate at the top. We're going to start from the top and work our way down. So the most expensive debt we're aiming to pay that off first. The snowball method, on the other hand, is where we're going to list them out, but this time we're going to rank them by the size of the debt. And we're going to rank that from the smallest to the largest. This is all about building momentum. Like that snowball rolling down the hill, as it picks up speed, it gets bigger and bigger. There's going to be a lot of anxiety around high interest debt. And if you feel like you can get somewhere and you're moving towards paying it off, even if it's not necessarily paying up the most expensive, then that's where the snowball method can work. If you go down the avalanche method, so you're ranking it by the interest rates, you're going to start with those highest amounts. So say you've got some that's at 30%, some that's 20%, some that's 15%. And then as you get closer towards the end, maybe you've got some debt that's around 5 to 10%. This is where you can start to have a blended approach and look at the stock market as well. You can, of course, still carry on paying that debt, and that can be a guaranteed return on your money. But if it's towards the lower end, so around that 5% or less, then that's where it could be worth, especially in the long run, looking to put money into the stock market. Global indexes on average return around 9 to 10%. So if your interest rate on your debt is 5%, then you're not necessarily going to get that every year, because of course the stock market is not guaranteed and you are going to get some swings, but over a long period of time, it could be worth putting some money there. You could also already have savings and investments built up before. And if you do have that, and you also have high interest debt that's above those percentages, then it's definitely worthwhile paying off that high interest debt first. So potentially selling some of those investments, even if you sell them at a loss, because you're going to be saving so much more money by paying off that high interest debt first. You could be getting around 10% a year, but you could be getting 30% on that debt. And remember, when you're paying off debt, that's a guaranteed return on your money. And then once we've completed these first 3 steps, we can now move on to step 4. Step 4 is the longer plays, specifically utilizing your workplace pension or a SIP if you're self-employed. Having an employer match your pension contributions is the best return on your money you're ever going to get. Not only will they potentially match the percentage that you invest into your pension, but you're also going to get tax relief on those contributions at your variable rate. And it can be so hard to get your head around investing into a pension, especially when you're young. When you're in your 20s, you're not thinking about retirement. But because those potential returns are so big, that tax relief is such a big game changer. You're not going to beat that on any other investment. So even if you can only afford to put away, say 2 or 3% each month, because you get the tax relief and the potential match from your employer, that could be massive in the long run. And that then moves us on to step 5, which is about building out that emergency fund. We've already built out 1 month of essential living expenses that we calculated in step 2. Now it's about building that even further. A lot of the unexpected expenses that might come up, you're likely to be able to cover that with your 1 month that you've already saved. But what about if you lose your job, you lose your income? Having a larger emergency pot allows you that time and freedom to not just have to take the next available job that comes up. It allows you to assess your options and really figure out what you actually want to do. This is where having 3 to 6 months can be so beneficial. You can, of course, add to this over time. It doesn't always need to be in one go, and things might change as well. Some of the figures are going to change over time, whether that's changes to your income, your outgoings. So make sure you are keeping a rough track of those on a regular basis. You can create your own spreadsheet to keep a track of this. I do have my own, which will save you a lot of time. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Using this, you'll be able to track your cash flow, your transactions, your investments, debt, savings, all into one spreadsheet, which is going to give you a good summary, and you can see exactly where you're at. You can also then see your progress over time. And then once we've built that financial peace of mind, then we can move on to step 6, which is investing utilizing tax-free accounts. This is all about putting your money to work, letting the stock market do the work for you. So in the UK, you can invest up to £20,000 into a stocks and shares ISA. That can be split between cash ISA and stocks and shares. It may be that you've built up your emergency fund, that you've utilized your cash ISA allowance. So of course, take that into account. But once you've invested that, you get that £20,000 every tax year. In the US, it'll be utilizing something like a Roth IRA. In terms of what you invest in, you want the majority of your money having a long-term approach, because that's where you're going to get the best returns. If you're investing into the stock market, you want to have a 5+ year time horizon. That's going to allow you enough time to make sure you get a positive return, but also to ride out any volatility. If you're putting money into the stock market and expecting to get a return within 1 or 2 years, you take on a lot of risk in doing so, because of course the stock market's not guaranteed. There could be wild swings within there. The average for the global stock market is going to be around 9 or 10%. But that's the average over a long period of time. In terms of what that long-term investing looks like, you can split this into 2 parts, active and passive. The passive route is going to be investing into index funds. So if you invest into a global index fund, that's the most hands-off approach that you can take, because you're essentially just betting on the world is going to keep on turning. You're betting on the world economy. You're not picking a specific regional sector that you think is going to outperform. You're simply just capturing and getting the exposure of the world economy. You can take a slightly more active approach by investing in something like the S&P 500, which is still generally passive because it's such a big market, but you are betting on the US continuing to outperform the rest of the world. I should say though, if you do invest into a global index, around 63% of that is still investing into the US because it's such a big market. If you want a more of an active approach, you could look at things like real estate, commodities, crypto, single stocks. Of course, you can have a balanced approach as well. It's going to depend on your risk tolerance. So you might want to have the majority of your money invested in, say, a global index, and then the remaining amount might have split between a few more speculative investments. You could also go down the active fund market as well. So this is where you're going to put money into a mutual fund with the idea that they're trying to beat the market. They'll have a specific benchmark which they're going to compare their fund against, and they're trying to beat that benchmark over a long period of time. And then once you've covered that long-term investing, you might want something in between. So you've covered the short term with your emergency fund, and obviously we've just talked about covering the long term, but you might want to have something in between. So say, for example, you're saving for a car, a holiday, maybe saving for a house. If you've got a time horizon of, say, 1 to 3 years, you're going to take on a lot more risk by putting that into the stock market. So you might want to have a few separate pots based on your time horizon. So the shorter that time horizon, that's when you're going to want more of that money, simply just investing in cash. So make sure you're getting a good return on your money, having it in a bank account. That's where you can utilize a cash ISA. You could also have a blend of different bonds. So bonds are a lot more appealing than they were, say, 5 years ago because interest rates are higher now. So the yield and potential returns you're going to get. There's two main types of bonds. You've got government bonds and then corporate bonds. So government is going to be your safer bonds. They're not going to pay as quite high yield as some of the corporate bonds will, but they'll be a lot lower risk because essentially you're getting that money from the government. If you want a slightly higher return and slightly higher yield, then that's where you go down the corporate bond market. But this all comes down to making sure your money is working, because the biggest killer to your wealth is going to be inflation. So the more money you can have in those longer term investments where you're going to get those higher returns, the more likely you're going to beat inflation in the long run and you're going to grow your wealth. I'll leave a link to my recommended investment apps down below. If you sign up, you'll get a welcome bonus for doing so. And just a few bonus points to note. Now, a lot of the focus is going to be on those outgoings. It's about being efficient with your money and making sure it's in the right place. Make sure you're also putting enough time into the income side as well. It's not always easy just to get a pay rise just by asking your employer, but try and think outside the box a little bit. If you're looking to move internally, are there potentially some other roles externally from another company that might pay you more for doing the same role? Are there potential skills you might need to learn and develop in order to get that promotion? So look at investing into yourself. What do you need to be able to learn, understand, develop in order to get that promotion or to get the next thing? Establish what you want your vision to look like. Of course, we don't want to be on this perpetual cycle where we're earning more and then just spending more. Make sure you know what you want your life to look like. Do you want to be self-employed? Do you want to have your own business? Do you want to pay off your mortgage? Or do you just want to focus on building those investments to have future income potential? The key with investing is automate as much as possible. So when you get paid, have everything already set up. You don't want to be doing anything manually. Not only does this take the emotion out of it, but it's specific and you've pre-calculated it. So say, for example, you're investing into the ISA. If you're investing regularly, set up a direct debit. So every month, the same amount comes out. The same with paying off debt. If you're paying a specific amount, have that set up automatic. So as soon as you get paid, it comes out straight away. Then you know what you've got left to spend. This is where the spreadsheet can come in really handy, because as soon as you get paid, you're going to know exactly how much you need to pay. Debt, savings, your pension, investments. It's all laid out for you, so it takes out the guesswork. And finally, make sure you have some fun. Money is there to be spent. Have some fun with it. The whole idea with setting out where your money is going is so you know what you've got left to spend. And then it can be guilt-free spending. The worst feeling in the world is when you're spending money on pleasure or happiness, knowing that, oh, I can't really afford it, or not knowing if you should be spending it. If you've already calculated all those essentials, you know exactly what you've got left to spend, then you're going to enjoy that experience so much more. I hope you've taken something useful from this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll catch you in the next one.